For this episode, we're looking at Dishonored 1, a stealth assassination game by Arcane Studios. Arcane Studios is a French video game developer founded in 1999 with offices in Lyon and Texas, USA. They are owned by Cinemax Media, which also houses Bethesda, id Software, Machine Games, Tango Gameworks, and Cinemax Online Studios. Dishonored was released in 2011 to critical acclaim, heavily praised for its unbound play movement and art direction. So let's have a look at the creative team, and I'm very sorry for any mispronunciation of any name I'm about to commit. The team had two creative directors, Rafael Colantonio and Harvey Smith, both also known for their work on Deus Ex 2000 and 2003. Visual design director Viktor Antonov, also known for his work on Half-Life 2, currently working on an upcoming survival sandbox game rooted in science called Rock. Art director Sebastian Mitton, also known for Bioshock 2 and Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. He was assisted by Jean-Luc Monet and Damien Laurent. Jean-Luc Monet also served as the lead concept artist for Dishonored. Lead character artist Florence Lapalou, also known for Brink, Spec Ops The Line and Bioshock 2. Lead environment artist Austin Germer, also known for Brink, Mafia 3 and The Bureau. Character designer Cedric Peyravanai. Seriously, check out this guy's ArtStation. Brilliant stuff on there. Combining their talent and skill set, these and others unnamed crafted one of the most iconic worlds this past decade, filled with unique environments visualized in a truly unique aesthetic. It's only fitting that a game which serves as a commentary on environmentalism, industrialism and social class has such a detailed and defined world where these themes can thrive and be told. At the heart of it all is a plague that has been killing off the Empire's populace for some time. And while the plague never directly affects us as a player, it has greatly scarred the world we inhabit and has been a huge factor in how the environment has been designed. The Rat Plague, as the disease is called, shares similarities with our own Black Death Plague of the 1300s, which is also still active in some parts of the world today. They were both carried by rats, killed off about half the population of Dunwall as it did Europe, and it also shares some of the same symptoms. This includes skin starting to rot, victims are greatly fatigued and can suffer from crazed behavior, and it causes its victims to bleed. But while the Rat Plague has its victims bleed from their eyes and eye sockets, the Black Death Plague had its victim bleed from lumps on their skin and through vomit. The first environment we're introduced to is Wrenhaven River and Dunwall Tower, the living quarters of the royal family. While we only get to see a small part of the tower, we can learn a lot about the royalties through what we see here. For a royal tower, there really isn't that much luxurious decorations as one could expect. Apart from a garden, the rest is iron, stone and concrete. There is no display of materialistic wealth or extravagant artistry on display here. It is also worth noting the very humble royal uniforms. Their clothes pride itself by displaying the educated craftsmanship of the state through style and fashion rather than materialistic wealth such as gold and jewelry. The tower and uniforms represents the royalties as not the kind of royalty who wears their wealth on their cape, but as modest and self-effacing. While our impressions of the royal family is mostly built through interacting and playing with Emily and the Queen's spoken compassion for her people, these visual factors also helps informing our opinions of them as good people before the murder and kidnapping takes place. Since we regard them as good people, we get more motivated to avenge our queen and rescue Emily. As for the tower itself, the plague is starting to have a visible effect on it too. There is a noticeable lack of servants tending to the place. This leaves a lot of dead leaves on the ground, moss is starting to grow on the tiles, and the garden appears to be in very rough shape. It shows the wear and tear of time since the plague started. The tower lets us have a look at the city landscape where the majority of the game takes place, and by observing the landscape we can learn a couple of things about the Empire as well. It is clearly in the very early stages of the Industrial Age. We can see multiple factories with thick smoke emitting from their pipes, creating smoke which lies low over the city skyline and port. They're all located throughout densely populated areas, and living there will surely cause a variety of health issues for the inhabitants. We can therefore assume that the medical field probably has not been developed enough to understand these health issues, or the powers that be is ignoring them. Not long after, we get to see the sea districts up close, where we see glass and metalwork, such as metal containers, are extremely common throughout the game, which indicates mass production at cheap costs. The extreme amount of them also leads us to reflect on the vast amount of heat and energy required to uphold such a production scale. A range of books and autograph logs by Piero found in his workshop informs us of the Empire's prime energy source.
The Academy teaches that absurd idea that the energy in whale oil arises from the need to maintain life functions at extreme ocean depths. The pressure and the cold are too much to endure without it. I speculate that a human being might, by a process of adaptation, produce high-energy humors in the body.
The importance of whales is empathized constantly through dialogue and appearance. Looking to the left as you arrive at the Renhaven River at the very beginning, you can see a captured whale. A great number of these ships are visible in the scenery, which helps indicate the great demand for this energy source. And one of the first things Emily asks about as you meet her for the first time is if you have seen any whales while you have been traveling for those 6 months. There's also statues, carnival masks, and more. Looking at the world map, we get an idea of the amount of ocean in this world, but we don't really get a good sense of the scale or the whales' conservation status. Their dependency on electricity, which is currently limited to the amount of whale oil, which is limited to the amount of living whales in the ocean, could prove problematic down the road. Judging by how we see it used, we know for a fact that while the whale oil would have to be extremely energy potent, it is also used in a very wasteful manner. They use an insane amount of energy having these electric field gates running throughout the city, for instance. All in all, the themes rarely feel force-fed, rather we take note of them as we observe the game environment and reflect on what we are seeing and hearing in context to what we've learned about the social and technological development in Dunwall. Even though we never get to directly affect them, their presence makes it feel like there is more happening in the game world, even though we're not there to directly see it for ourselves. There is a great variety of environments in Dishonored. The Dunwall Tower, a variety of sewers and streets, the ballroom party, and the otherworldly dimension of the void. You get to see the highs and lows of Dunwall and beyond. Dishonored leaves us unchained to explore them vertically and non-linearly, yet disorientation is a surprisingly rare problem. Each scene has been cleverly designed in some way to help us stay oriented as we traverse them back and forth. The exteriors has been designed with distinguishable structures and skyline silhouettes, and the street layouts avoids grid lines for the most part. There's also a great variety of textures and assets on street level and in the interiors, which helps greatly with creating memorable and distinguishable locations. So let's take a walk around Hound Pit's pub, the home hub of the rebellion which we return to between missions. Coming up the stairs, we found ourselves squeezed between these buildings. They are placed somewhat in the center of the level boundary. A narrow open space between the stairs and the buildings leaves us with some viewable distance to orient ourselves and learn the key layout of the buildings. To the left is Piero's workshop, which is where you will upgrade your gear and restock on items. It has been placed closest to the dock to have it be the first and last building the player passes when returning or venturing out on missions, making it convenient to stop there and restock on items before doing so. To the right is a large open space leading up to some shortcuts that you can utilize to navigate the environment faster. This open space can also have some mental benefits, as the buildings feel largely occupied by the characters who reside there. They got personal rooms and personal items filling those rooms. They have private conversations about you behind your back. And there is also some private social development between the characters, which elevates the feeling of trespassing while passing down the corridors. It also doesn't help much that Corvo's room is placed up in a dirty and dark attic. So the wide open space outside feels like a non-intrusive zone where the mind can truly be at ease. Moving out the back is another wide open space. There isn't much happening here early on, but by moving around here you can get yourself familiarized with the area, as you will return to it at another time where that spatial awareness will prove useful. Moving through the building, you get to see the impressive attention to detail that continues on throughout the game. There's a crazy amount of objects and textures present through it, and each texture and object goes well together, representing the facility as old and used, which leaves us reflecting on better times before the plague. Smoke particles emitted from the factory pipes and machines are still resting on the windows from when the facility was used. The glue on the wall is drying out as the wallpaper is peeling off, which is also partly polygonally defined. You see the covered furniture, old papers spread across the floor, and the generally dirty tone of each surface. The entire building is a reminder of what was lost to the plague, something once great now decaying. In large scenes like this, objects are usually restricted to have a rather low poly count, but there are also smaller levels, like in the interiors of the boss estate, which is the masquerade party, where the artists gets to let loose a bit and focus the artistry and processing power into a more focused space. Just look at all this gorgeous detail throughout the rooms. The walls, the roof, even the books in the bookshelves are polygonally defined.
Good evening. Ooh, scary mask.
There's a lot of details in this environment, and that detail is not always present in all the other environments. The textures are mostly hand-painted with thick and flat color strokes, and also very much splashed effects, which looks like something between rough concept art and part stylized illustrative work. It's easy to see how a bit of character artist Cedric Peyravanai's concept art carried over into the texture phase with the 3D models. As for the lighting, it is often quite flat at daytime with very lit ambient light. There's simply not that much contrast at all through most sceneries, be it with color or light contrast. But there are of course exceptions to this, especially at night times when interiors are often only lit with natural lights like moonlight shining through windows and sometimes tiny oil lamps in some corners. But the light from the oil lamps has a really short range, and they are there to lead the player up a path rather than light the room they are in. So this leaves a lot of the corridors and rooms in the game almost pitch dark at times. The character models further builds on the unique aesthetic with interesting skin textures on top of some overly stylized body proportions. Some characters come off so thin they are borderline alien and freaky due to the proportions, yet they do not feel out of place as they are not so uncommon, and the body types has many iterations going down from the fattest and down to the skinniest levels. Some limbs, such as the hands and arms, stay close, if not the exact same across the different body types. On large character models it looks good, but on thin character models it looks a bit too cartoony at times. Another trait of the character models is their skin complexion, particularly the red skin around the eyes, cheekbones and forehead. It would most likely be irritated skin, or it could very well mean that many of the inhabitants of Dunwall suffers from some kind of skin pigmentation disorder. But it is most likely just a visual trait which is not intended to be interpreted into the lore. As it is, it serves as natural makeup and highlights to help with the depth perception of the face and so on. There is also the unusual bone and muscle growth throughout the face, particularly the frontalis muscles, making the forehead appear strangely muscular and huge. There is also the cheeks, which is often formed with an unusual edgy cheekbone. The result of this ends up giving a oddly tactile surface. But again, it doesn't really feel out of place. We grow to expect this from Dishonored because the entire game is in some way stylized. We don't really expect realism from Dishonored because it thrives in its own visual identity, and it's easy to leave ourselves open to however it wants to represent itself. So let's move on to some technicalities. The game runs on Unreal Engine 3, an engine which has been a centerpiece of the game industry since 2004. The amount of games made with this engine is both vast and great, so have a look at the list of games at Wikipedia and you'll surely find many of your favorite games on there. Unreal Engine 3 uses a Fung shader for its opaque materials, combining diffuse, specular and specular power, where specular power is a microsurface channel, which simulates the uniformity of the light bounce off of the surface. This allows for control over reflections and creating mirror-like behaviors. It's very much like glossiness / roughness and smoothness in PBR shaders. The game does not really utilize specular power much, and specularity is only used subtly on environmental materials. I think the game has been criticized before for the generally low texture resolution, but we can speculate that the reason for this is due to the vast variety of texture files for each scene. While the current generation of GPUs have between 3 to 8 gigabytes of VRAM, the GPUs of 2012 and before usually had between 1 or 2 gigabytes. So to fit the vast amount of textures, they would have to be compressed and shrunk to lower the storage requirements per texture. So if the choice was between higher resolution textures or texture variety, I think the developers made the right choice going for the latter. Since they did that, the streets and interiors feels like a natural environment because the objects and surfaces within it seems to be unique from each other. It is a large part of what makes Dishonored feel like a very natural and convincing place. I think we've looked at the game enough and it's time to start recreating a model. And to make our recreation more precise, we will first generate the game model with some photogrammetry magic. Photogrammetry works best with larger format pictures since more pixels yields better results. But we should be able to create a usable low quality representation of the model utilizing snapshots from within the game. By having a scan model, I will have a great silhouette as a reference whenever I'm unsure of any alignments. Personally, I use Agisoft Photoscan Standard for this, but there are many options out there ranging in price and licensing terms, so just Google and you'll find a lot of hits. If you want to see a detailed demonstration of photogrammetry and how it works, there is a great playlist on YouTube that is listed on my channel, or you can search for it yourself, where university Professor Cyril Stucknitz of Bonn University talks in depth about it, so definitely check that out. So now I'm just erasing some points, because these points will be generated as geometry if I don't remove them myself. So to have a clean created surface, I would have to clean this up. And there is a lot of waiting in these programs because baking this process takes a lot of time. This program uses OpenCL, so it uses the GPU compute power, so it's not slow, but it's a lot of points to calculate and stuff like that, so it takes time. And so yeah, there is a lot of waiting, and I think I baked it first at the medium or low quality, and I think it was over in an hour or so. I don't remember. But then I went back afterwards, but I didn't include that in the video. And I rebaked it overnight, but it wasn't really any visible difference there because the images were not good enough. So even if I just bumped up the quality, there weren't enough data there to actually generate any new surface. So it was a waste of time, but anyway, the waiting time can greatly vary depending on which setting you use, and sometimes it doesn't really pay off. So it's in some cases, if you know you have bad data or bad images, then you might as well keep it low. And so these scanning programs, they don't really have a way of knowing how you would like the object oriented. Or maybe it does actually, I don't really know. Maybe it has like a plane you can drag out and say this is the ground plane or something like that. I don't know. I have to check that out actually. I'm not sure. But I usually just reorient the object myself. Because I only have to scan it once. I usually don't have to scan it again. So I can just orient it myself in Modo or whatever program I use. And the easiest way to do that is just to orient the polygons and snap the pivot, or the center as it's called in Modo, to the center of the model, and snap it again to the bottom, and then put the object at the 0, 0, 0 coordinate of the origin. And then it's oriented. And having this model, as you can see, the model is completely useless for baking because the surfaces are very bubbly and uneven, and that is because there's not enough data for a scanning program to know what's there. For instance, on the top plate of the roof, so to call it, of the whale oil tank container, there's almost no data there, so it just made some really strange surface. And that is also the same for under the drilling table where you place the wooden piece there. That is, I had almost no data there, so it just generated some random stuff and filled in the hole. I noticed that the in-game model actually has a small edge, or as you can see there. That is something the in-game model actually has as well, and I had to recreate that in the I had to recreate it in on the high poly model as well, so it actually bakes correctly. Because if I just have that on the low poly model instead, then there will probably be some uneven inconsistency between the high poly and the low poly model, so I had to make that at the high poly mode as well. But I think maybe the artist at Arcane Studio had the top part of the machine head as one high poly model, and the one below it where the edge is formed is another separate box, so it's easier to actually make that. But I had it all made in seamless surface object box. So it was a bit of a pain in the ass to actually recreate it, but that's also what's fun about this this concept here, that I have to recreate even things that seems like are errors. It's probably not an error, it's probably intentional, but to me it seems like a strange detail. So we're gonna skip ahead to where we've started on the low poly model, and we'll soon start on baking. For this model, I decided to just copy the entire high poly model and delete edges where needed. because in this case it's a lot faster than going through with a retopology tool, because everything is very simple. Everything consists of very simple forms with rectangles or cylinders, so it's really easy to just delete whatever is not necessary and merging vertices. The difficult part of this is actually getting the polygons right, because I want it to be really close to the in-game model, so I have to look at how many polygons, for instance, the cylinder has, and I had to get close to that, as close as possible. But I did take some liberties, as usual, because there are some cylinders on this model, on the in-game model, which is in odd numbers, so it's like 7 or 5, and I usually always subdivide in the power of 2, so I can just delete it like that. But if I wanted to match the polygon on the roundness or the shape of a cylinder on the model, I couldn't really do that because the edges were not aligning with the in-game model. So in those cases, I just ignored that and actually just gave the model 1 or 2 more edges. So it doesn't really align perfectly with the in-game model, but it's really close. But it's just, if I wanted it to align perfectly, I would have to recreate a brand new cylinder and align it. And it's not hard to do, it just takes more time. It doesn't take a lot of time, just a minute or something, like less than a minute. But when you're working with a big model like this, or when I'm working with a big model like this, I prefer to keep these precision mouse precisions operations to as few as possible, because they build, you know, if you do the same thing 1,000 times over, which you will do on a model like this, then having just one less or something once in a while, it actually helps for me. I'm packing everything into a single material because the entire model is completely still. There's nothing changing on it at any time, so I decided to keep everything on one material, so there's less stroke holes. That also means that I have to use a pretty big size, texture size. So I'm probably I decided to try to keep it at 2K or 1K. I'm not really sure how the in-game model does it, if it has multiple materials or how big the texture size is, but I'm trying to estimate the pixel size of the source model or in-game model and my model, and see if I can try to make it appear correctly. One thing that I didn't do here that I should have done is to explode the model, because when I bake it, it makes the ambient occlusion map takes the shadow from the high poly model, and in some cases I have some bolts which are five-sided cylinders, and around that you see the shadow of the high poly model, which is completely round, and that doesn't look good. So I should have gone back and exploded it, but to be honest, I was pretty tired of modeling this model after a while, and I had other stuff I wanted to do, so just left that be and accepted any errors otherwise. I'm currently using Modo Indie, which is restricted to 200, I think it's 200,000 triangles on export, so I can't really subdivide the high poly model in Modo and expect to be able to export it out of there. So I have to export the unsubdivided high poly model and put it into Blender, for instance. and subdivide it there, and then export it out of Blender again into whichever program I'm using for baking, which in this case is Painter. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but especially at times when I have to do it multiple times because I've done some error, or like in this case, I forgot to insert edge loops on the whale container. So I had to go back and insert edge loops to make the edge more tight, and well, it's just takes just a couple of minutes extra, but it would be nice to if the Foundry decided to remove that restriction, because it doesn't really make sense to me. But it just means that I have to do that extra step, put it into Blender and sort of right there. I don't really know. I understand that you have to restrict it somehow to be able to have a higher price point on the full version, which is like, I think it's $13,000 or euros. I don't remember. I can understand that, but I really wish they found some other way than restricting poly counts. So as this baking process finishes, you will see I have some baking problems with the table and also the roof of the whale oil container. And I found out recently that there are two options that are by default set to on in the vertex normal options that you can turn off. And if you turn these two off, then you will get better vertex normal angles, which helps a great deal when you're baking. And before I knew about this, I actually went through the model and fixed the vertex normals manually, which was a really pain in the ass, but I didn't really know it was possible to adjust the vertex normals like that. So that is a quick tip for any Modo user out there. So now we're moving into the texturing phase, and as I mentioned before, it's really hard to actually make a replica in the sense of textures, because you have to get all these minor details. And since Unreal Engine 3 and UDK has this specular power channel, which is the microsurface channel, which is basically the same as the roughness channel in the PBR shader, I will utilize that channel a little bit. But as you can see on the in-game model, it's really not that reflective at all. It's really a dirty model with dusty and there's almost no specularity either on it. All the light that hits the model is absorbed into some surface, be it dust or be it the metal. Actually, metal doesn't absorb light, but you catch my drift, right? It doesn't reflect any specular lighting. So we're gonna have to try to imitate that, but at the same time, we can also have some liberties to make the model look good within Unreal Engine 4, utilizing all the AGI and stuff. So we're gonna try that. And I'm organizing all the layers here like I usually would when I would make a smart material, for instance. I like to work this way because if I make something that I really like, it's already stacked and prepared to be made a smart material of. And it's also just easier to work this way because everything is organized. I won't get confused by which layer does what and how it all fits together. I know that all the roughness things is in the roughness channel, and there's no other layers that should mess that up for me. So if I see an error, I know where I can find this and correct it. And I'm close to the base color here, but I need to nail all the color variants, dirt and the oil and whatever it's coloring the in-game model. And that is the hard part, because Dishonored has this splash on texture motif, and that is really hard to replicate perfectly. So it's actually it's almost impossible to replicate that.